Don't let me put words in your mouth. Tell me all the other ways that you are a progressive candidate.
I'm a progressive candidate because I want to put real proposals on the table on how to incentivize more corporate profit ending up in the hands of employees. Because, it's always been a meme of the Republican Party that, a rising tide lifts all boats. That is just not true. That is just not true, and I think we've got more than ample evidence to prove that. So I want to tinker with our tax code to create incentives for employers to put more money in the hands of their employees. And because I have some knowledge of that tax code and I have some knowledge about how compensation is derived, I actually have something to say about that. I also happen to know why it is that our union movement is dying through death through 1,000 cuts. Right? We started out somewhere around 22% of private employers unionized. We're now under 7%, and I can tell you why that is. And we're dealing with a union movement that's a bit of an anachronism. It starts from the premise that you're going to go to an employer and you're going to work there for 30 years and earn a retirement and be straight. Well, that's not how millennials think of their work life. Right. And because of that, they're not seeing the value of union membership in their life. And I want to change that. So I have a real proposal on how to deal with that and how to change and how to make unions relevant in today's more more malleable and more individual work-life kind of situation. So that's something I talk about. I talk a great deal about environmental issues. I talk a great deal about how we treat our veterans. I am a veteran, and I have a real proposal on how to clear these backlogs of people who have complex claims for benefits. These are things that I talk about, and I don't know that, I hate that word progressive just because it makes it seem like it's somehow fringe or it's not mainstream or whatever. Look, this is common sense, people. This is what's decent and rational and pragmatic, and by the way, it's as conservative because it makes money sense as it is progressive because it's morally sound.
Tell me more about you said something about the union that I think is that was really interesting to me. You said why the union membership is down to 20%, right? Unpack that a little bit. Tell us why you're an advocate for unions and why you feel like that is a major issue.
So just to set the background, I was corporate counsel for 15 years. So I was in the room when we were deciding what to put on the table as bargaining proposals. I was in the room when we were deciding, how do we keep this union out of there? To be fair, I did that very seldomly. I was a labor attorney, not a labor avoidance attorney. Okay, so those are different concepts. But I was in the room, and what I learned was that no matter what the union does, the company always is in a stronger bargaining position because management giveth the management taketh away. And the thing is that what I found is that unions are put in a position where they have to take very strong positions just to look relevant, and they would win the battle, but then they'd lose the war because the management could always just take the jobs elsewhere. They could always just cannibalize a plant that was too uppity by just removing all the strong management, not investing new equipment, and then claiming that this particular plant's not making money and shut it down. So there was always leverage that management could use that unions could not respond to. So that was part of what I saw happening. But the bigger issue is that organizing a workplace is an extremely difficult thing to do. It is expensive and it is difficult. And what the unions have ended up doing is relying on the National Labor Relations Board to help them out. And so what Republicans did was start cutting funding to the National Labor Relations Board, right? Left, right, and center. So they became more and more impotent, slower and slower to be responsive. As you know, justice delayed is justice denied, and the persons that are agitating are still fired. So in the end, that didn't have the effect that they were hoping it to have. So what I'm trying to propose for unions is to say, hey, everything that you need for your existence is based on this notion that it goes through the employer. The relevance of a union to an employee is predicated on that employee's relationship with an employer, right? What if we change the paradigm? What if we had a system where unions could represent employees and that there was no room for the employer in that relationship whatsoever, right? So let's just say I come out of nursing school and I want to join a union. And I decide to join the California Nurses Association. It's a big union, right? I choose that union because it's going to give me leads on jobs. It's going to give me training. It's going to give me certifications. It's going to give me mentors. It's going to give me support when I need it, you know, and it's going to help me learn what my prevailing wages are. What should I be negotiating for my job? And if I run into a problem at a job, it can stand with me. Now, the relationship between me and the CNA is not dependent on who I'm working for. It's a lifelong relationship between me and my union that I can carry with me no matter which employer I go to, right? That creates not only a mechanism for me to have a relationship with the union, but it also creates a mechanism for me to give dues to a union that is not tied to my employer. Every time you allow the relationship with the employer to dictate whether you have a relationship with your union, the employer will find a way to dissuade you from being part of the union.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you do in a state, in a right to work state like Florida then? How would that relationship look in a state like Florida?
Well, first of all, right to work has nothing to do with that. Right to work has nothing to do with the right to work. What right to work has to do with is the question of do I have to be a member of the union to be an employee at this employer? Mm-hmm. Okay, so if my old company was Florida Power and Light, right to work says I can work for Florida Power and Light as an electrician without joining the union, but I still get the benefit of the union contract, right? I still get the benefit of union representation if I get fired, right? So, absolutely. Right. So what my paradigm says is, hey, you don't get union benefits unless you pay for union benefits. That flips the script on its head now, doesn't it?
No, it does, because in the previous conversation, everything in the current paradigm, particularly in Florida, is they do get the benefit of the union even though they're not a part of the union, and that's been a #1 mechanism to weaken unions across the country. So you're saying just completely sever that relationship, that employer relationship in general.
So where you would have to tweak the statute is that you would have to make sure that employers don't get to say, well, I'm not going to hire you because you're a CNA. Right? Or I'm only going to hire SEIU nurses, or, you know, you got to change the law to prohibit that. But to the extent that unions rethink their role with their members, right? If I'm an employer, let's say I'm a construction employer, and I know that the only way I'm going to get my project done on time, under budget, with great work and a great safety record, and everybody's showing up on time, is if I hire IBEW electricians, then the cachet is to be a part of the IBEW rather than to be outside of the IBEW, right? How do we make being a part of the union something that employers look for rather than something that employers obstruct?
Well, there's always been this this enmity, right, between capital and labor. There's always going to be that competition there. So how would your paradigm actually even address that underlying fight between capital and labor?
Because the reason that enmity has been created, part of the reason, it's not the only reason, but part of the reason is that the collectivity of the union membership was that we can force the employer to give us what we want. Right? We can shut down the employer. And when I'm going to call a spade because I speak truth. A lot of that was male ego. Okay? A lot of how unions walked into bargaining table sessions was to say, I'll be damned if I'm going to be pushed around by management, so I'm just going to stand firm on something that's not even all that important, just to show that I'm standing firm. Testosterone played a lot of roles in that. And I've watched this myself personally. It's principally men at these things, okay? So that what gets created in that paradigm is an us versus them, you know, paradigm. But let's say that you flip the script and you say, okay, let's change this altogether. And rather than be the thing that obstructs your project from being completed successfully, we're the ones who guarantee that it'll be done on time. We're the ones who will guarantee that every one of your workers is going to be properly certified, have good safety mechanisms, will show up on time, and not only that, if they are not good, we'll take them to task.
But many unions throughout history have, maybe not the exception, with the exception of guaranteeing work done on time, many unions have facilitated that type of thing throughout history of unions. So
absolutely, some have, but many have not.
Okay.
And that they have to counterbalance that with being the representative within the context of a particular employer. If the union had a broader reach across many employers, they would have a broader reputation. It would be less confrontational, I think. It's just a thought. You know, like I said, this is something I'm putting out for discussion. It's not like I'm a fiat, like Pam's going to make all this happen, right? I'm just throwing this on the table for discussion because I think there's a lot to be discussed here.
Well, that was okay, so that was going to be my last question on the union thing. It's like, have you seen this modeled anywhere? Where are you drawing this paradigm from?
And elements of this that exist in Europe, and it's sort of the concept of a guild, right? You know, and like the Freemasons used to, back in the day, you wouldn't conceive of building a building without the Freemasons, you know, workers, because they were the ones who were truly skilled, and they were the ones that you knew were going to do the job right. And you didn't want to be on the outside of that, because you would, you know, your project would get the, you know, stank face, right? They're like, oh my God, what is that? That's shoddy work. We have moved away from unions as guilds, right? And moved more towards this sort of, you know, and a lot of that I think came from the auto industries back in the 50s and 60s. It became this kind of, this is the house union, we run this place, and because they got satisfied with running that place, they didn't think about how many other places they could be involved in. You know, they're just happy to run GM. You know, and I'm like, yeah, but you could have been relevant in so many other ways. And nowadays, you can't count on an employee base sticking with you for 30 years because they're at the employer for 30 years. Because they're not going to be with the employer for 30 years. They're not.
Yeah, I think that's and you said that at the beginning. You've said so much, like and I'm not saying that in a condescending way at all. Like each sentence that you've said has been packed with something that we can unravel. And one of the things that caught my attention was what you said about the impact that the millennials have on union membership. The fact that we're not going to be anywhere for 30 years. That's just the new paradigm. So. Yeah. So how do you compensate? This is the last question. I'm not going to keep. How do you compensate for that in your paradigm, in your idea?
Again, the relationship is between me and my union. So let's say we created a guild or a union of software designers, right? I can be a software designer for IBM. I could be a software designer for Apple, or I could be a software designer out of Joe's garage. But all of us collectively are members of the software designers union. Okay, well, what do? I pay them, you know, $25 a month. They give me job leads, they give me mentoring, they give me training, they help me upgrade my skills, they help me to figure out how much I should be charging for my services. All of a sudden, they're making me a better professional, and I have a relationship with this union that's got nothing to do with my employer. I can get benefits through my union. I can get, you know, like I said, I can get positive things that help me develop as a software engineer or software designer that got nothing to do with an employer.
Well, let's cut to something very important that I think I may have missed. Then, if it has nothing to do with the employer, then where's the collective bargaining involved?
Well, it doesn't have to be collective bargaining. I mean, collective bargaining is a small part of what unions really do. What unions truly do is manage work relationships day to day. That's really the bigger part of the union. It's the person who makes sure that your work hours are straight, that your overtime is straight, that your paycheck came out right, that you've gotten the right training, that when you got passed over for a promotion, there was somebody to stand with you. So collective bargaining happens once every 4 years. What happens in between? Management of the relationship.
But now, you're not saying relinquish collective bargaining.
No, I'm not saying. I'm saying in addition to. So if I'm IBEW, I can have a cadre of employees that are through the collective bargaining in the workplace type paradigm, and then I can have all of these affiliate electricians that are part of IBEW, but they work for themselves, or they have their own mom and pop business, or they, you know, whatever. And now I have all of these great electricians that are affiliated with me that are giving me dues. I'm relevant to them, but they're not in a collective bargaining unit. As an employer, right? It's not in lieu of, it's in addition to.
All right, right on. I can see. You know what? One thing I'm not afraid of is exploring new ideas. Something just to approach it from a different angle. And there's so many other things that we could talk about that I'm going to have you back and we will talk about. But the number one thing we're talking about tonight, let me circle back, is the fact that you are running for this seat that Marco Rubio has vacated. You're running against Alan Grayson, and you're running against.
I'm running strong against them. I'm only what, 4 points behind Alan in the polls. And I have no money, no name recognition, no backers, no nothing. It's just